Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel. Welcome to those of you who are new. Welcome back to those of you who are seasoned veterans. Just a heads up, I'm actually doing a little bit of research into what's working with the channel, and after the Saturday Night's Main Event stuff that we've already promised, and once TNT is finished, we are going to move back to doing some Superstars of Wrestling stuff because that's one of the more popular things on the channel. I was looking at some statistics today, and that seems to be where people are going outside of the interviews. So we're going to go back there eventually. We're going to go back there probably within the next month or so. But anyhow, just something to look forward to. But as for this is the Raw review for the 25th of May 2020. Things on the show I liked, things on the show I didn't. I consider it a mixed bag show. It was better because they had folks in the crowd, even though they were NXT folks, in the crowd acting as crowd members. But it is what it is there. We open with the Memorial Day video. I will do a shorter version of what I did on the SmackDown thing. I don't agree with these videos. I think with a worldwide product, it is foolish to augment the victories of one military. And so I think it's perfectly okay to have a 10-second, hey, thank you to all the people in the U.S. military who sacrificed, comment on the show. I think that's fine. But to have a whole video, 3, 4, 5 minutes dedicated to it, you've completely alienated your international audience. And if people say, well, they probably put something else in its place, that's great, but you're still creating extra work for your video editing staff and all of that. There doesn't need to be acknowledgement in the form they do it of military stuff. I feel the same way about Martin Luther King. Well, actually, I feel the same way about every holiday. I don't care if it's a U.S. only holiday or not. I think taking 30 seconds to a minute to say happy whatever holiday is being celebrated is appropriate. Anything more than that is overkill and goofy. That's just always been my thought when it comes to pro wrestling and MMA, but that's just me. Anyway, so we then move to the fact that there are, in fact, several NXT people in the audience, some of whom have been on TV. That's a little awkward, but anyway. Everyone's been tested. Good for them. They're at least acknowledging that there's something to be tested for now, which is better than they were a few months ago. And then we go to the Kevin Owens show to open the program. He acknowledges the wrestlers around ringside being the future of the company, and he laughs and says, the one's wearing a Kevin Owens t-shirt. He introduces his guest, Asuka. Man, I mean, I will give Asuka credit. I think she speaks more English than they let her. I wish they would let her speak more. But with what she does with facials and expressiveness and body language and exuberance and energy, man, she outworks at least half the roster when it comes to promos. And I didn't get on that bandwagon until the last probably 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So somewhere between 4 to 6 months ago. But man, I love Asuka now. She's entertaining. She's wonderful. She's expressive. She's fun. And I think that's one thing that WWE in general is missing is a lot of fun. So good there. You know, there are the mom shirts available on the Shop Zone now, which I guess is fine. Asuka is asked about being champion. She's shown clips of Nia Jax. Charlotte Flair interrupts, and Kevin Owens let her know that she wasn't invited. Charlotte has something to get off her chest. She says she should be the Raw champion, and that Asuka's never beaten her. Natalya interrupts. Kevin Owens puts away props from the set because Natalya broke the set last week. Natalya said she wasn't here to cause trouble. Charlotte basically calls Natty a suck up. Nia Jax interrupted. And then Jax threatens to bulldoze Asuka at Backlash. Owens kind of in there and saying don't hit her. Asuka hits Jax with a back fist, and then Charlotte and Natalya brawl around the ringside area, and then they break the segment. Man, I'm so tired of seeing shows open with interview segments. Like, in a real sport, you'd have a highlight package, or you'd have, the announcers welcoming you, and then you'd get to action. Somehow in WWE, they think that we want to hear people talk for 15 minutes, then get to action. I'd rather have them open and say, our first match of the night is blank, and then go into that, even if it's 5 minutes long with entrances, that's fine. Then go to the talk segment. But opening with a talk segment, just from a logical booking television standpoint, if I'm changing channels at the top of the hour and I see people in the ring fighting, I might stop and go, who's that guy? Who's that girl? If I see people talking, I'm going to go, they're talking again? Like, just, why do it? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, Caleb Braxton interviews Apollo Crews. He says that this is the best night of his professional career. He'll become the new U.S. champion. I don't know. I think it's too late for Crews myself to really be something big. I think he can be a good bit player. I think he can be a good, middle of the card. We won't remember this reign in 6 months kind of guy. He's great in the ring. I enjoy him. He's gotten better in promos. I enjoy him too. But I'm a very quick-minded person. I believe in giving a talent 6 months to a year. If they haven't done it in that time, you take them off TV, you repackage them, and you try again. I think when a guy's been around for 4, 5, 6 years, or a woman's been around 4, 5, 6 years, and they haven't gotten over with what they've been doing, it's a waste of time. It's an insult to talent who haven't had an opportunity, and it's counterproductive. It's harder to turn a crowd onto someone they've seen not be successful before than it is to turn them onto somebody they've never seen before. Anyway, Samoa Joe is announcing here, which is just lovely. I think Joe, and I understand he's out with a concussion or some other injury, but I think Joe is actually a better announcer than he is a wrestler at this point in his career. Now, I understand that that's because he hasn't been given chances to wrestle. I get it. But at the same time, he adds a credibility that is sorely missed on things like SmackDown. He does the same thing for Raw that Beth Phoenix does for NXT, which is bring a credibility and a smoothness to talking that only someone who's been in the ring at a star level, because that's why I'll get to Corey Graves in a minute, can bring. There's an excitement, there's a cadence, there's a wonder to it, and it's great. I am not a fan of Corey Graves as much as I used to be. He's grown stale. He's become homogenized with what the office wants. And I get that's not his fault. And I don't blame him as a person or a professional, but I don't enjoy him as much as I used to even a year ago because he's just there and he hasn't grown sufficiently to make me feel like, hey, this guy's really trying. Anyway, we open with Apollo Crews and Andrade in just under 8.5 minutes. Crews with a suplex early, and once again, this is for the U.S. Championship. Andrade hits an early near fall after an elbow. Crews is distracted. Crews gets an enziguri and falls onto Vega. Vega's off the apron. Andrade checked on Vega and apologizes to her. The break is super quick. First break of the night is super quick. Andrade hits a double foot stomp off the top rope. They cut to the back in the middle of the match. I hated this. They could have placed it a different place. If this is a championship match, and in theory, let's call the U.S. Championship the third most prestigious championship in WWE, Intercontinental, maybe the three world, and this is where there's too many championships. But, okay, we'll make it simpler. The second most important championship on the brand, maybe the second most important championship on all brands. Anyway, an important championship. And we cut to the back. No, this can be done after the match. Doesn't need to be done during the match. I like what they did. I just don't like where they put it. Angel Garza, he's watching on the screen. He's flirting with Braxton. He's comparing lovemaking to the match. He's talking about how, you know, you need to come together, and you need to. Sometimes it goes slow. Sometimes it goes fast. Sometimes it goes hard, etc. and so forth. Lots of innuendo, not very PG, so I'm not sure where they're going there. And then it is what it is. Cruz comes back with a press slam. Standing moves not in standing shoes are pressed for the win. The win kind of came out of nowhere, and I don't know, even if they had a regular audience, I don't know that the win would have been something where fans were like, yay, and they're on their feet and they're excited. Because I think it came out of nowhere in such a way that the crowd would have paused and went, 1, 2, 3, yay! And there would have been a pause because it didn't come in the normal structure of a win. Anyway, Charlie Caruso interviews him, said lots of people have doubted him. He says after 11 years of hard work, he has finally won his first championship in WWE. He says he never quit on himself, and now he can tell the world that he's the new United States champion. I don't mind this. I would have done something different, though. If the U.S. Championship is going to be the secondary championship on Raw, and it seems that it is, they have this catalog of footage, right? Going back to the history of the U.S. Championship in Crockett and with the WWE over the last, I don't know, I think they introduced it in the early 2000s. So let's call it the last 18 years. So they've got this catalog, and he could have done a 2 to 3 minute interview before the match talking about how he wanted to join some of the best U.S. champions ever, MVP and Matt Hardy and from a generation before that, Sting and maybe Great Muta. I think Great Muta. Sting and Ricky Steamboat and Steve Austin. He wants to join. He wants to put his name next to those people. I think at this point, the championships that matter are the respective women's championships, although I think now that you've got an NXT on cable, I think the respective championships are diluted even more. But certainly the heavyweight championships matter. I don't think the Intercontinental Championship and the U.S. Championship matter enough. I think they need to be rehabbed, and the way to do that is to tie history in with it. At least that's my experience. Anyway, we cut back to a Seth Rollins promo. Rollins is holding a Mysterio mask. He says that tonight's a night to celebrate, and he's better than he's ever been. Rollins was in a dark place after Money in the Bank, but Mysterio presented himself as a sacrifice for the greater good of everyone involved. Rollins couldn't imagine the pain that Mysterio and his family went through. He acknowledges Dominic couldn't be there. Now, they didn't acknowledge that Dominic was fired along with the rest of them, which I think is ridiculous. Anyway, he talks about it possibly being the final act of the career of Mysterio. He then says Austin Theory and Murphy are, a big deal. He says the ceilings for them under him are limitless. And Rollins' guidance, they thank him for his guidance. Theory said he thought he had friends on Raw, but the only friend he needs is Seth Rollins. Theory thanked Rollins for all the support, and he says that they will make a example of Carrillo and Aleister Black tonight. Charlie interviews Charlotte Flair, who calls herself the most consistent and prolific champion in the WWE. I would agree with this. She raised the bar for every female in WWE, and no one compares to her. Asuka danced into the frame, and she shows off her championship and says red is not your color. Couple of things. So I get what they're doing with the Seth Rollins thing. I don't really understand why, and I don't know if people see it, but they're just copying AEW at this point with a cult-like thing. I think they're doing it better because they have better talent doing it. However, I think Seth Rollins could do it, but I don't think they've given it enough depth. The depth that it needs is like, guys, I was in Ring of Honor. I was in, and this is a Rollins promo. I was in Ring of Honor. I was all over the world. I was one of the best in the world, and no one paid attention to me. And yet I came to FCW, which later became NXT, and I made my way. And if you really want to make your way, and every generation has people that want to make their way, and I know that someday I won't be here forever. I know that one day I won't be here. And when I'm not here, I want to leave a legacy, and I want to leave a legacy beyond my own body. I want to leave a legacy where I have trained up disciples to lead the WWE long after I'm gone. Murphy, Theory, anyone who wants it bad enough, you can join us, because we are willing to make the sacrifices you won't. But, simple promo. This story doesn't have enough meat to it, and some people might say, well, give it more time. No, this has gone on too long for us to not know why Rollins has flipped his lid, and I think that's hurting the overall impact of Rollins as a character. Anyway, the Charlotte Flair thing, she is the most dominant person in WWE right now. She's also on the most programs. She's also one of the hardest working, and I think for her to point that out is a good idea. I don't know where the be-all end-all is, because I think she's risen as far as she's going to go, but if this is what they have to work with, and I don't remember this fully, but I think Charlotte and Andrade, who I believe are still romantically involved, live in the Florida area, and it may just be that they can get to the Performance Center 3 days a week for TV, and so for that reason, she's been given opportunities that she might not have under other circumstances. I can't quote to that, but I think that has something to do with it. Next is a segment to me they could have scrapped, the Iconics promo. I'm sorry, I don't get the Iconics, and I want to address. There's some YouTuber who's really popular, JD something or other. I want to address the fact that he is making things personal with talents. And I endeavor never to make things personal unless I've had a personal interaction with a talent. That comes down to the way I was trained when I was in the independents as a play-by-play person and as a backstage help. I was always trained, you don't make things personal, we're entertainers, and we all work together for the greater good of the product and the business. I have a major problem with people who've never done it being critical of people as people. You can have any opinion you want to have. You can say whatever sucks. You can say whatever's great. It's subjective. It's art. You're going to have your opinions, and everyone has the freedom of expression, at least here in the States, to express that. But when you make it personal, when you attack a person that is portraying a character, really you show your mental ignorance, you show your inability to assimilate into societal normalcy of respect, and you really show that, and this may get this particular video demonetized, but you really show your nature of being an attention whore. This type of behavior needs to stop. It needs to stop everywhere. It's a snowflake society in one way and in another. A lot of people say it's a snowflake society because everyone's special, but also it's a snowflake society because everyone thinks their opinion should matter. Well, no. If you haven't done something, then your opinion on how to do it doesn't matter as much, or shouldn't matter as much, as someone who does. As in, I don't think this individual could live the life that these men and women live on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. I don't think he could make the sacrifices. If he could, he'd be out there doing it, and he wouldn't be sitting behind a computer. So obviously there's some sort of an emotional deficit somewhere that makes him believe that it's okay, and others too. I'm not picking on this one person. I don't care. he's the target right now because he's the one who made this personal. But for anyone in any field of endeavor, if you are making statements about people that you've never met, don't know, have no reason to understand how their mind works the way it does, and have no authority to be, um, critical of their person, then in all honesty, understand that you're being ignorant. You have a right to your opinion. You have a right to express it as an opinion. There's the key. Say, in my opinion, blah, 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 this is true. In my opinion, blah, 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 that is true. But don't sit there and claim to be an authority on something you know very little, if anything, about when it comes to factual approach. And, of course, this goes back to him calling out Alexa Bliss, who's in the segment, which is what made me think of this. And I'm sorry for the aside, but it's just, especially as someone who works with people that have been through bullying trauma, and how it actually affects their brains, and how for some people they never recover from it, and as someone who's been the victim of a bully, I'm very passionate about this social issue because it does cost people their lives. Looking at Hana Kimura, and I know I'm pronouncing her name wrong and I apologize, but looking at the fact that this 22-year-old young lady, who obviously had problems outside of wrestling and entertainment, but at the same time, her life ended in part, who knows how great a part, due to the words of people on the internet. And that's unconscionable. And I do hope those people are appropriately prosecuted. Anyway, so Royce and Billy Kay, I don't understand them. I don't get why they're popular. It doesn't click with me. At the same time, they're doing the best they can, and if they have to be on TV, I don't know that there's a better way to use them or not. So they recall coming together. They recall signing with WWE together and winning the tag team championship together. Obviously, they won the tag team championships together. That's part of being a team. Anyway, the opportunity to defend their titles is coming. The opportunity to, the opportunity was originally stripped away from them due to injury. They should still be champions, and they're going to let the crazy lady in the office's favorite blonde, get what's coming to them. So Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross enter. Bliss laughs at the favorite blonde comment. Some people would say it's true. Who knows if it's true? I'm sure that she has some people that are in her corner more than there normally would be. But anyhow, they cut off Nikki Cross, who tries to talk. And then Cross snapped back and told them she's took a long road to get here. She's a long way from Scotland, and she scratched and clawed and did everything she could to become a champion. And Bliss was one of the only people that accepted her and kept her focused along the way. The Iconics attacked them, and obviously the canned audience does what they need to do. Lana approached MVP in the back. She stared him down and then said, "We need to talk." And he says, "No, we don't," and he leaves. Tribute graphic to Shad Gaspard. Again, I'm going to go backwards for a second. Why Shad Gaspard, who died a hero, who saved his son's life by being a man and being a hero and stepping up and choosing his child's life over his own, doesn't get more time than the Memorial Day thing? I don't get it. Here's a person who worked for your company. Here's a person who sacrificed, slaved for your company, was away from his family for your company, and passed away. This should have gotten 5 minutes. This should have gotten 3 minutes. This should have gotten time. And the fact it didn't just shows me how brainwashed some of the people who produce and work for WWE are into the false patriotism or the Fox patriotism that, oh, we're the United States, or and it happens in every country, so I'm not picking on the U.S. It just happens that the U.S. is where this originates from, so that's where it is. ABC country is patriotic because we're better than everybody else. Dude, don't people realize that the reason we go to war is because people believe they're better than each other, and therefore the reason people die is because the assimilation of superiority is the focus of mass media? Okay, sidebar over, but to put that in front of the concept that a man who used to work for your company died, I just don't get it. Anyway, we're back to the program, and that leads to the MVP Lounge with guest Drew McIntyre. So, he invites McIntyre in. McIntyre tosses furniture around. McIntyre's worried about Lashley. Lashley is not there at the moment. MVP wanted McIntyre to recall the last time he was in the lounge. He said he took him out with the Claymore kick. MVP says he knew that he would go on to become champion. He says that MVP, wants to be responsible for McIntyre losing the championship to Lashley, and he says after 13 years, Lashley gets his shot, and he wants the win to be because of him. McIntyre said it took him 19 years to get the opportunity. He beat Brock Lesnar in 5 minutes. McIntyre said Lashley could take the belt out of his cold dead hands. MVP says this can be arranged. Lashley comes out. McIntyre wiped out MVP with another Claymore kick. Lashley helps MVP to the back. And then McIntyre dares him to get in the ring. I wasn't a fan of this, and I'll explain why in a second. So, I'm a fan of MVP as a talker. I'm a fan of Drew McIntyre as a talker. What I'm not a fan of is this whole, it took Lashley 13 years, it took McIntyre 19 years. So, in theory, it takes a decade and a half to 2 decades to be good enough to challenge for a championship. You're making your talent look weak and unnecessary by saying it takes that long. Again, championship athletes, yes, some of them fight for a very long time to get a championship. Yes, that does happen. But when the majority of them are fighting forever and not just a few years, it devalues the value of the athlete themselves, and I'm just not a fan of it. Also, not a fan of MVP being this quasi-manager wrestler. Pick one. Be a manager who manages and gets dragged into things, or be a wrestler who's beside another wrestler. The flip-flop on what MVP's role is kind of frustrating. Mark my words, if they go with it, Drew McIntyre is the face of the company for the next few years. He's the most charismatic guy, at least in my view, since Cena. And I know that Daniel Bryan fans will say, that I'm insulting Daniel Bryan. No, Daniel Bryan gets over with a certain level of the audience that is hardcore wrestling fans, and that translated into getting over with the mainstream audience. But a natural pick and in alignment with what Vince has a preference for, which is bigger guys, Drew McIntyre is the stereotypical interest in what Vince would like, and pushed correctly, he could be the guy for the next several years while they get somebody else ready. Don't know if they'll do it, but I see that potential in him. I saw it, actually, it's funny, I saw it when he was in Evolve, and I wish I'd been doing this then, but someday I'll go back and review those Evolve events. But even then, after he'd been released the first time, he had that it factor. He brought it out of himself. He learned how to have it over a 2 or 3 period, but he had it, and he still has it, and he'll have it as long as they allow him to use it. Anyway, Caruso backstage tries to get an interview with Natalya. Natalya takes a call from Tyson Kidd. She's apologizing for her tantrum, and that's all she could do. She then told him that she didn't have time for this because she's going to match later. And Angel Garza is out in a match with Kevin Owens in 3.5 minutes. I think they should be protecting Garza better than this, but maybe they're still limited by the number of people they can have on shows because the travel bans are still in effect some places, so maybe that's why Garza takes the loss here. Garza attacks Owens from behind early and targets his knee. Match starts in the ring, and Garza immediately drop kicks the knee and works it over for several minutes. Owens hits a DDT, making a comeback. He can't, however, hit his normal cannonball. Super kick for a near fall from Garza. Owens headbutts Garza off the top and hits a senton. Owens goes for a pop-up powerbomb, but his knee buckles. Garza slips out and hits a wing clipper for a relatively quick win. Garza winning is the right thing, but at the same time, if you're not going to follow up on it in the sense of, him celebrating a little bit or doing something more with it, I think that's a mistake. So we go into what's straight out of Coliseum Video. That's a Street Profits Viking Raiders golf segment. Yes, I said golf. Street Profits and Viking Raiders are shown. They're arriving at the first hole on the golf course. The Profits are excited to see that there are drinks available. Raiders said that there were no drinks. They pulled out turkey legs and they start gnawing on those. They're reminded of the etiquette of the game of golf. Bunch of editing together golf hijinks and craziness and tomfoolery. Another golfer gets hit. Golf cart holding the Raiders had a tire collapse under the weight of the two men. They go to a mini putt-putt course and they dance together upon arriving. Raiders think they won, but Ford says they didn't. And then that's the end of that segment. These comedy segments, they are what they are. I'm not a fan of them, but I get it. They're trying to fill time, and they're trying to give three-dimensional personalities to basically, and no offense to Crime Time, but Crime Time Light here in the Street Profits. And they are trying to, I guess, round out the War Raiders. My thing with that is the Raiders should be like the next LOD. They should have a manager who's doing their talking for them. The talking should be less than 60 seconds, and they should go and rip people's heads off. They could bring back single-handedly tag team wrestling that people care about with the War Raiders. I think they're that good, but I don't think Vince or the writing staff combined is behind it enough to do it. Lana approaches MVP again. She basically says that she feels bad about what happened earlier and offers MVP a bag of ice. He blows her off. She's upset. We're almost 2 hours into the show and there's less than a quarter hour of wrestling, which is just sad. Murphy and Austin Theory with Seth Rollins defeat Carrillo and Aleister Black at just under 4.5 minutes. Not a fan. Austin Theory, I will say this every time out. I think he's one of the futures of WWE. I really wish he'd gone somewhere else so he could be better rounded, but he didn't. He's here. So since he's here, they should be protecting him like he matters. Black hits a series of strikes on both guys. Attacks Carrillo. Murphy cut him off. Carrillo goes for a moonsault, lands on his feet. Theory rolls away. Carrillo hits a move off the top of the apron. Theory gave Carrillo the ATL for the pinfall win. Good that they win here. I get it. I'm glad, but the reason I say that Theory should be protected, I don't think he should be in there with guys yet who are at the level of an Aleister Black. And I know some people say he's not that big, but at the same time, you're talking about him having multiple vignettes over a several month period, and I, to me, they should be building Theory for another 2 or 3 months before you put him in there with main guys. And maybe that again comes down to the limitations they have in number of talents that are there. But anyhow, that's there. Murphy and Theory beat up Carrillo after the match. And then Black grabs a chair to protect him. Rollins demands that he stay where he is and put the chair away. It says Carrillo will lose the eye otherwise. He warned them that if they didn't listen to him, Mysterio's sacrifice would be in vain. They dropped Carrillo and left, and Black checked on him. If I don't particularly care for this, I mean, the whole sacrifice thing is just goofy. Anyway, Edge with a really awesome sit-down promo. Whoever produced this did a really good job. Edge says that Orton caught him flat-footed and tongue-tied on Raw last time. He then says that he's doubting his own ability, and says that he was out of action for 3,212 days, and in that time, Orton had over 1,100 matches. He said that he did the research. He thanks Orton for making him want to prove himself. He said he watched the Last Ride documentary with Undertaker. Good cross-promotion. He sees himself talking about the right time to hang it up, and now he's going through the same thing. Orton was doubting his wrestling ability, but Edge had hung with The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Owen Hart, and Mr. Perfect. Odd that Mr. Perfect makes his way in there. At least I thought that was odd. Good nod to Owen Hart with the Owen Hart documentary out there. And I know that Edge and Owen were friends. I think the first Intercontinental title, or maybe the second. But an Intercontinental title reign for Edge did come from defeating Owen. I know that much. Anyway, he said he's adopted to every style. Edge admitted that everything he just said was in the past tense. He didn't know if he could do it, and he says that he would dig in to the depths of his soul to try, and that's all a person can do. Really good promo here. We go into the third hours, and they do another interview with the Street Profits and the War Raiders. This time they are going to bowl. How many more weeks of this do we need to see? Who knows? And MVP and Lashley approached the Profits. MVP called them clowns and a waste of talent. He then challenges them to a tag match later tonight, which, no. So, Triple Threat up next, just over 15 minutes, as Nia Jax defeats Natalya and Women's Champion Charlotte Flair. Asuka joins on commentary. Yes, a sentence I did not think I would say. Jax slams Natalya on top of Charlotte. So, technically, that could have been a pinfall. Referee didn't acknowledge it, though. Charlotte recovers and teamed up with Natalya to throw Jax shoulder first into the ring post. They go to the outside. Once again, Charlotte and Natalya team up. They do this goofy spot where it takes, it looks like they're laying roofing tile or something. Charlotte and Natalya just take about 2.5 minutes to gingerly walk like you're walking a puppy Nia Jax over into the corner and powerbomb her through a table. It was stupid. If you can't do the spot where it looks like it's going to hurt and you're having to work together that much, maybe find another spot to do. Anyway, Natalya and Charlotte were colliding in a crossbody when we come back from commercial. Asuka shoved Nia back into the ring. Natalya applies an armbar. Jax picks her up and hits a one-arm powerbomb. Charlotte tries to steal the pin but only gets a 2 count. Charlotte then goes up for moonsault, which she telegraphed and missed. Few more near falls. Charlotte puts Natalya in the figure 4. A leg drop from Nia Jax breaks that up. Jax hits a Samoan drop and a pinfall. Jax faces Asuka at Backlash. Asuka seemed reasonably happy with this. McIntyre told Caleb Braxton that he wasn't planning on Claymore kicking MVP. He was just asking for it, and he then said that, or she says that, did he know that they're facing the Street Profits? And then McIntyre implies that he's hanging around for the match, saying he's going to find something in his locker room. The announcers remind us that Rob Gronkowski is still the 24/7 champion, the longest running of the bunch. Gronkowski said that he is, he's in the gym and he's ready to do whatever it takes to hold on to the championship. Braxton asks MVP why on earth he'd want to fight the tag champions tonight, and he just points to Lashley and says that's why. Graphic of the greatest wrestling match ever on the screen. Ric Flair spoke and says that he believes that Randy Orton is going to win the match. I don't know, man. You have Ric Flair. Ric freaking Flair. Multi-time champion, perhaps one of the best of all time, certainly the best of his generation. And you have him put over this Orton Edge thing as the best of all time? Are you kidding me? Are they that tone deaf? Really, really stupid. Like, I don't get it. Anyway, Liv Morgan's out with a promo. She says her biggest stumbling block in her life was her own self-worth. She couldn't remember a time she ever thought she was good enough. She goes all the way back to childhood with this. She says the first time she felt she was good enough was when she got her first wrestling gear with her name on it. She said she still didn't have all the answers, but she would, she'd find it. She's living her best life. Aleister Black and Seth Rollins will fight next week. Rey Mysterio would have a retirement ceremony next week. And then we go to the main event. The main event, which runs just under 11 and a half minutes. MVP and Bobby Lashley against the Street Profits. Since when do the Street Profits qualify as main eventers in WWE? I don't get this. Look, they're a team that the character isn't for me. I get why it works when you have an audience. But let's suppose that you have fans that just watch Raw. Are you really willing to take 4% of your television main events for the year and throw it at a tag team that won't be here in 2? It doesn't make sense to me. It's not logical. It's not linear. To me, a television main event should mean something. And before they come out and say, well, you've got X amount of TV to fill and blah, blah, and sometimes you got to have main events that don't matter, then cut back on the amount of TV you have. And before you come out and say, hey, well, then you're going to lose money, I'd rather have a sleek product where the people can count that everything matters so you have more people watching than have so much television time at the end of the day that you're filling it with subpar stuff in the main event position. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, Lashley uses his power, drives forward into the ring post, and remains in control through a commercial break. Ford dodges MVP when they come back and gets a hot tag to Dawkins. And then Bulldog by Dawkins. Ford drives Lashley into the barricade on the outside. Dawkins gives MVP a spine buster. Ford follows up with a frog splash. Before they could go for the cover, Lashley pushed Dawkins into the post and put Ford into the full Nelson. Lashley, who was not the legal man, didn't break the hold, was DQ'd at the 5. I mean, I'm not a fan of DQ finishes, but at the same time, if they're trying to reestablish rules in order for the referees, you've got to do it somehow, and this is as good a way as any. McIntyre comes out and brawls with Lashley. The ref couldn't stop them, so he sent wrestlers who had been previously held behind the plexiglass for the safety of everyone in, and several wrestlers come in. They're separating the two men, Lashley and McIntyre, to close the show. I guess this is fine. I mean, at least it makes you kind of care about the network per view, the Backlash thing. But at the same time, if they didn't do this, would it have mattered? Not really. In any event, that is your Raw review for today. And tried to get here earlier, didn't happen to do so. In any event, we're also going to have several TNT uploads. Going to move to Saturday night's main event. We'll be back probably tonight, hopefully tonight, depending on what my work schedule looks like for Impact. We'll cover the NXT and AEW stuff on Wednesday. As always, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. Until next time, everybody.